All right. This is Horns Up. I'm Animesh.
And I'm Peter.
And Peter, let's start off all guns blazing. We're going to be talking to Kathir, who most of us know as the vocalist of Singapore-based Vedic metal band Rudra. But the conversation isn't just about Rudra, right?
Yep. In this episode, we introduce the Wandering Ascetic, the new album Crimson, which is scheduled for release next month via Transcending Obscurity.
So let's dive right in. No extra setup required. Joining us from his home in Singapore, here's Kathir. Ready to do this?
All right. Sounds cool.
All right. So Kathir, Horns Up is essentially about us tracing our metal journeys. So let's trace your roots. How did you discover metal?
Yeah, that's a very good question and a very interesting one for me as well, because I grew up in my early years when I was in my years that I can't even remember, perhaps as a child, and eventually into teenage years, I grew up listening to Santana, Michael Jackson, Pointer Sisters, and stuff like that. It's all 80s pop music that I was listening to. That was primarily because of my dad, because he used to play those records at home. And also listening to a lot of Tamil music, Tamil soundtrack music of the 60s and 70s. That's what I grew up. And then in the late 80s, I stumbled on a couple of rock albums and heavy metal albums that got me interested. The first being Def Leppard. Def Leppard's Hysteria was the first rock album that I listened to, and I got hooked onto it. And from there, I went on to Motley Crue. Which is a big influence on me, because I think Motley Crue is probably one of my favorite bands till today. Mm-hmm. I love it. And then Guns N' Roses, King Diamond, and all of that. But that did not bring me into extreme metal yet, right? Because these are still heavy metal bands. But my first taste of extreme metal band was actually Metallica. But I did not like it.
Really? Which album did you listen to?
I listened to Creeping Death. And then I listened to Ride the Lightning, and I did not like it. And I'm not a Metallica fan till today. That's something, very, very. I guess a lot of people would be disappointed with the fact that I'm not a fan of Metallica. But to be very honest, I like specific albums of Metallica. That I do, yes. And my favorite being And Justice for All.
Oh, mine too.
Yeah, that's my all-time favorite Metallica album. But the band that really got me into the extreme side of metal is actually Slayer. So Slayer's Rain in Blood and Seasons in the Abyss inspired me. So that was the first band that wanted me to form a band. The second band that wanted me to form a band was Sepultura. Right, Sepultura's Beneath the Remains, Schizophrenia, and Arise. These three albums were also on repeat on my CD player, and at that time, I told myself, you know what, Motley Crue, Sepultura, Slayer. Now these three bands really wanted me to form a band, but the band that really gave us the confidence to do what we are doing is Battery. Right. So Battery was the band that gave us the confidence that, you know what, you can play anything as long as you love it and you have the passion for it, and it will sound very good. And that's what I discovered in the first three albums of Battery. Now, you don't need to have good production, but what you need is just some great hooks. And you can get people hooked onto your music. So you can see that these four bands shaped my musical taste, and eventually what happened in Rudra.
So taking off from that, with bands like Def Leppard, Metallica, all of these are seminal. Now, both of us are products of the 90s. How was it for you in Singapore growing up? Was it easy to find metal, merch, fans?
At that time, in the early 90s, for me, it was through friends, actually, because I was studying in a polytechnic. I was doing my diploma in engineering. And at that campus, I had a lot of friends who were into metal music, and that's how we exchange tapes. All right, so that's one thing. Like, we would hang out in the we call it the canteen, right, during breaks, and then someone would say, "Hey, check this out, King Diamond. Hey, check this out, Death." Of course, Death being a very big influence on me as well. So that's how we got to know different bands. Sacred Reich, name it, all the early thrash metal as well as Bay Area bands, Exhorder. Now, all of this were actually, I listened to Megadeth, Metallica, all by basically through friends. Now, that's number one. Number two is we had many shops in Singapore selling tapes of metal bands. It was readily accessible. Now, even T-shirts, right? We had shops where we could buy rock merch and metal merch, T-shirts, stickers, patches. Now, we had that, it was available in that sense. So we had no difficulties in terms of accessing music. It was not a problem at all. Just that perhaps CDs were very expensive then. So we resorted to tapes actually. So it worked for us, yeah.
Tell us a bit about the local bands in the scene back then. What was it like back in the 90s?
No, at that time, there were, now it all depends at what phase we are talking about. Now, if you're talking about the early 90s, now we were very much isolated from the scene actually. There was a metal scene at that time in Singapore, and there were a couple of bands. But we had no contact with these people until a little later in 94, 95. So the first 2 years, we were kind of isolated. So we are like kind of a mushroom in that sense. Okay. Right. So yeah, we were kind of a mushroom where we just sprouted on our own using the influences that we had. All right. But we were aware through zines and magazines that there was a first wave of metal bands in Singapore. Now, at that time, it was Global Chaos. It was a band there were bands like Global Chaos, Opposition Party, Silent Sorrow. So these were the bands that were around prior to Rudra. All right. So these were bands that we have not watched, we have not met them, but we have read about them on magazines. And so then we were part of then when Rudra came out, which was in 92, we were part of the second wave of metal bands in Singapore. So during the second wave, there were a couple of bands that of course, also sprung up along with us. I think the only band that has been around since then is Impiety. But we have never met the guys from Impiety until much later in 98.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we have never met. So we all, although it's a very small island, but we never got in touch with each other. We never met up, although we have met other bands. But the only long-standing band, I think, alongside us today is Impiety.
Oh, yeah. Impiety's been around for quite some time.
Yeah, they've been around as long as us, actually, perhaps, or perhaps even 1 year older. Yeah.
So let's fast forward to today then. Singapore's hosted several big metal acts, has quite a few exports. There's you, there's Wormrod, several other bands. There are quite a few gigs. I've played there thanks to the Ride Peddlers. We played Singapore last year and met some fantastic hardcore punk acts. Shout out to Mucus Mortuary. Really fun guys. But I don't know, I still get the sense that Singapore overall today isn't a very metal-friendly place. I mean, there is Enoki and what you see in the Peninsula Centre, but given the political vibe of the country, there's this undercurrent of pent-up aggression that's a little bit different. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it has always been very stable, but I think the heydays are perhaps over in that sense. I think it was in the late 80s and 90s were perhaps the heydays of extreme metal in Singapore. After that, we have been, of course, it has the attendance and the kind of subscription that we have has dwindled tremendously, but it has been stable for the last 20 years. So in the last 20 years, gigs that we have played, the attendance is very much stable. It's like the most you may get is about 200 people or 300 people in a small venue for a extreme metal act, and that has always been the case for us as well. So we play to 200 people, 300 people in Singapore mostly. So it is very much stable. But having said that, now the one of the things that perhaps you asked a very good question that borders on to anthropology, actually, if you ask me, because because the thing is, the fact is, Singaporeans are very happy people. Now, when you're happy, you can't write metal. I mean, let's face it, right? Because we have our GDP is very high. People, I guess when you were here, you would not have seen as many beggars on the streets, because there's a welfare system. People are very comfortable. When Black Sabbath was in Birmingham, you need an environment gloomy and bleak like that for you to create, really sludge and heavy hard metal. Napalm Death, so we need something like that. So I think we are very comfortable. We are too happy. We are unhappy with things that are perhaps not what I call as big issues. We are unhappy with things that are very, very, in relatively speaking, we are happy with things that are perhaps not the biggest issues around the globe, right? Because we live in a country where practically everything works most of the time. All right. So our unhappiness is very subjective in nature, very personal, perhaps. Especially for people who are artists, because we feel that you can't make a living being an artist in Singapore. You can't thrive doing what you love. Now, all of these are perhaps not big issues, but they are, like you said, these are undercurrents, right? There is like a drone, in our life. We are unhappy with this. Some of us look at the bright side of it and move on. Some of us, prefer to stay there and perhaps ruminate over this. So, but in spite of that, because of the fact that we don't have very big issues, we don't have an oppressive system. Like Sepultura was born in a very oppressive culture, right? And Slayer was primarily a response to religion, right? So you see, we don't have anything to respond to except perhaps the perceived absence of freedom of speech. Yeah, so because of that, this is my opinion, not that it's a fact. So I don't think we have a lot of issues to write about, except maybe bringing metal into the sphere of art. So you look at Mucus Mortuary, is a classic example of that, art.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, these guys, they put on great shows because it's artistic experience, an aesthetic experience watching them.
So now that you've said that, let's look back and see what inspired you to start a metal band with Vedic themes. I mean, there was nobody who had explored that sound at that time. What really sparked it?
So there was a time in 90, because when we first started in 91, we started playing covers of Sepultura, Slayer, Black Sabbath, and even Nirvana. That's what we played. Then what happened was there was a growing dissatisfaction within me and Shiva, the drummer. Now we felt that, we do not want to be apes. We did not want to play covers because we wanted to express our voice. And so we wanted to find our voice. And when we started, so we told ourselves that we're going to write originals. So we started writing original songs in 1992, which got released just last year. We released an album full of bedroom recordings from the era from 1992 till 1995. So we had managed to unearth some of these recordings from the vault, right? So you can hear those very early recordings, which sounds a lot like Battery. It's early Sodom. Yeah, you can listen to that. It's called Past Life Regression. So in 94, we were at the crossroads already, because we felt that we started to sound like bands that we admired. Now, this is the biggest challenge for bands. I think you would know that probably. Now, we subconsciously tend to ape the bands that inspired us, that we liked. All right. Although I don't think it's quite impossible. It's quite impossible to remove that 100%. It will still stay forever, I guess, the influences that we have. But what happened was Shiva and I, and the band member at that time was Bala and Selvam. So we told ourselves that, we need to do something unique. Now we need to do something unique that nobody else could possibly ape. So that's when we asked ourselves what was very unique for us. And we realized that all of us were of Indian descent. Yeah, all the band members, all our grandparents came from India. Right? So we had something in common, which was our cultural identity. Right? So we thought perhaps we should delve into that. Why not look into our own backyard instead of trying to explore new pastures? So that when we asked that question, at the same time, there was something else happening in my life, which was I started to get very much involved in philosophical study, studying religions as well as philosophy. So, and then I started to get interested in the ancient Indian philosophical works. And at that point in 94, where I was serving in the military, I stumbled on a book that inspired me. And I thought that, let's bring these two worlds together.
So it was just purely taking two worlds that interested you and smashing them together.
Exactly. That's it. That's it. So I started to also learn a little about Indian classical music for a while, for a year, to understand ragas and how they are actually played, and how the what do you call, the scales that are used, the ascending, descending scales. So all of that was brought into Rudra's music. That was what we did. So we brought the number one, the philosophy, number two, the musical modalities in the way it was written. So we had, I think you would already know that there's a flavor of Indian classical as well as folk music in Rudra's music. That began at that time. What the earliest song that probably manifested these ideas is actually what is that? It's Dwelling in the Unknown, a song that was written in 94, 95. You can see those ideas creeping into Rudra's music.
Now that we're talking about crafting the Rudra sound, I mean, there was no reference point to your sound back in the early days. What was it like recording your self-titled album as well as the Aryan Crusade? Both albums which really defined the sound for the band.
Yeah. So it was, to be very honest with you, we had no reference, right? So therefore, at that time, when Shiva and I at that time were already starting to write this album, and we were very apprehensive because we had no reference point. We told ourselves that, you know what, let's try this out and see how the world responds to this. And so once the debut self-titled album was released, we had our fingers crossed and see whether the world hates it or whether it likes it. And thankfully, it was the latter, right? So people liked it, and it's still our biggest selling album. So that gave us a lot of hope and confidence to write the Aryan Crusade. And that's why you see the Aryan Crusade, it's bolder. It is longer. The album is longer. The arrangements are different. And I think for some people, they still claim that Aryan Crusade is our best. It's the definitive Vedic metal album.
First album I heard.
Kurukshetra was my first album.
Yeah.
Going back and adding on to what you just said, metal and both Hindustani as well as Carnatic classical music pride themselves on purity of form. There's a well-defined boundary of sorts, and while you can color in as much as you want within it, step outside the box, that's still kind of frowned upon. Given what you were doing, forming a new sound, how did you judge what you made? Did you look to others? Did you consult musicians?
All right. So I'm not a fan of Puritanism, right? So I'm not a fan of that. And I think that the world can benefit more from eclectic approaches where we can bring ideas and sounds together. So that's one big, what I call belief that I had, a belief system that kind of contributes to what we did. So in that sense, what we did was, the benchmark for us was basically how we felt about what we wrote. So every time we wrote a song, we trusted our instincts. We trusted how we felt. So when we wrote a song, when we played it again and again, and that kind of cemented if it's going to be on the album. So that's the only benchmark or the kind of a litmus test that we used, which is ourselves, whether we like it. And to be very honest with you, in the early days, every song was written within 30 minutes or 45 minutes. That's how quickly we wrote, because I could play the electric guitar, so I would be writing a lot of songs in the early days in my bedroom. And the moment I know I've got a riff, I will record it down on a MD tape, all right, and then MD disc, and then I would bring it to the studio, and then we will nail the song within 45 minutes or an hour, nothing more than that. We would not work too long on a song. That's our principle. Because if the song doesn't sound right in the first 2 minutes, now dump it. If it sounds good, now keep it. That's it. That's our principle. So we wrote songs very quickly. And a lot of songs, like the song Amen that was in Aryan Crusade, was written in just 20 minutes. Yeah, it was just 20 minutes. We wrote the whole song. And a lot of songs on the first three albums were written in a very short time. Kurukshetra, every song was written in the studio within 2 hours. So sometimes it's like 2 songs one song in the studio. That's how we wrote. We write songs very quickly. The only thing that we spend more time is once the song is written and we like the song, it's like 80% there. We will only work on the arrangement if it is necessary. When we play it again and again and we find some parts repetitive, we may cut that down, or we may add a section for solo and stuff like that. But it's usually baked by the time we leave the room, because we work with a lot of recording equipment at the time. So every session is recorded on audio digitally, right? Even back in the days, yeah, we do that. So that's how we worked, and we do it very quickly. If it sounds right, that's it. Do not waste any time on it. Let me give an example. That I think right now the crowd favorite that we played, The Pathless Path to the Noble Unknown, which is a very famous song in every show. It's usually the final song of the set. Now, you will not believe it that we almost scrapped that song.
Yeah? Why was that?
Because when we recorded that song, while I had the vocal ideas was in my head, but it wasn't there when we recorded it in the studio, and when we practiced it in the studio as well, because I have not finished my lyrics. So the bandmates found it very repetitive. Even the engineer was saying, this song is very repetitive. But once I laid the vocals onto it, it became a hit. That became the most favorite song for everyone in the band. So yeah, so we sometimes we really trust our instincts, and we trust everyone's instincts. So we always go on a mode of consensus. Even if one person feels that this is good, we would go for that. We do not need everyone to agree. Yes, that's the principle. We do not go on a vote where everyone has to agree. No, we ask now, the four of us, do we feel that this is good? If 3% says that it is not good and one member says that it is good, we'll take that judgment as let's go for it.
Oh wow, that's a really different approach.
Yeah, that's quite a healthy approach. Now, since you're writing songs in such a short time, I'd assume that you would have a very clear focus or vision of what you were trying to achieve, or what you wanted the song to be. So is there an oral vision that you were going for? And if so, what was that vision?
Yeah, usually it takes shape in the room, in the studio. That's one approach that we take sometimes. We let the music do the talking. That means now when we come up with a hook or a riff that we find that, this is amazing, and then let's continue on. Let's develop that riff. And when we develop that whole song, now the whole song without any lyrical ideas may give us certain moods or certain feelings. I think in Sanskrit it's called rasa. That aesthetic experience. So sometimes we look for that experience. If it is too happy, we will ditch it. All right. Or if we really love it, then it becomes an interlude, and that's how the interludes that you have in Wandering Crusade, right, came up to be. So that's one way. That's one way that we develop songs. The song evokes the experience, and then we decide what the lyrics is going to be. Now the other way is to set the direction. That means with some albums, we plan the direction and the approach for each song, and the theme and the philosophy and the topic very much in advance. So when that happens, while the lyrics are not written yet, but the idea is already in my head, because we decide how many songs are going to be in the album before we start writing it. That's how we work. Yeah, okay. We know exactly, because you would know that every album in Rudra, except the first one, every letter or every first letter of the song would actually form a mantra or a Sanskrit phrase. Yeah, it was deliberate. So from the Wandering Crusade onwards, if you take the first letter of every song and you string it, you'll see a phrase. So therefore, we plan this very well. We plan this well in advance, and we also plan the theme and the ideas behind each song well in advance. Now, one of those albums where we worked entirely taking the second approach, where the theme guides the song, was the album Rudra. Rudra, the seventh album. Now, Rudra was entirely driven by concept, lyrics, and because it's based on the Ramayana, and each song is based on one episode from each chapters of Ramayana. Right. So therefore, it was very strongly defined by the story in Ramayana. So that was the second approach. So that's how we write usually.
So let's take a step aside from Rudra for a moment. In recent years, there have also been bands with Vedic themes like Dying Out Flame from Nepal, also Cult of Fire from Czech Republic. What do you make of them?
I think these bands are great bands. They have, I'm in touch with some of these guys, or I'm in touch with guys who are in touch with these guys. I think all of these guys, I'm not sure about what they, what it means to them, perhaps. So that is something that is unknown to me. But I kind of admire the way that these guys have taken it forward. Something that like Cult of Fire, I think it's great. Everything in Sanskrit and Hindi, I think it's fantastic. So that is very amazing, an amazing feat to do that. And the concept is very tight. The stage appearance is amazing, right? I take my hats off to these guys. And of course, Dying Out Flame from Nepal, amazing, brutal death metal. And I think it has taken form. And there are more bands like Kartikeya in Russia who has taken another form. And I recently come across a couple of bands that have written to me as well, telling me that how Rudra has inspired them to do something of their own. And the good thing that said the positive thing or the feeling that I have is positive because these bands did not try to become us. Now that's something that I admire. The fact that they created a path of their own, because we wouldn't want to see another Rudra, all right? But instead, they've created a path of their own, created a niche for themselves. So that gives me a lot of satisfaction that, yes, that this genre, not us, but this genre has spawned more bands taking these ideas in different directions, very different from what we are doing, or perhaps not as similar.
You spoke about this a little while back, the Black Isle sessions and also past life regression. When can we expect some new music from Rudra?
Right. So we have now. What happened was in the last 2 years we have gotten a little more busy. We are busy with a lot of work commitments and stuff like that, business and work and stuff like that. But we have we have composed a couple of songs that we are planning to take it to the studio in the next week, actually. Yeah, the next week. So we're going to finalize the songs, and the recording sessions would begin by June this year. So we hope to get an album out by the end of this year or the beginning of next year. Now, yeah, and in between that, now we also planning to release an EP that is going to come out, which is a bunch of cover songs of bands that inspired us. All right, so it's now about to be completed, and that would probably see the light by June. So you will have an EP in June and possibly a full length by the end of the year or the beginning of next year.
So there's a lot to look forward from Rudra this year. So keeping you busy is a new band, the Wandering Ascetic. The debut album Crimson releases next month. So what can metalheads expect from this album?
Right. So now the Wandering Ascetic was formed in 2012, 2013. We had one EP out. It was called Manifest Destiny. So at that time, it was a three-piece. Myself, the bassist Jay, and the drummer Kannan. So, and then in a few, just 2 years, 1 year after that, we recruited Vinod from Rudra as well. So 2 members in the Wandering Ascetic are from Rudra. Now, why another band, right? That's a good question. Because I'm for a fact, I don't like project bands. And if you realize, I don't participate in many bands. Mm-hmm. I try to stay focused on Rudra, and I don't do anything else. But back in 2011, 2012, now, I did not want my artistic output to be confined to philosophy and Vedic ideas. There are also other parts of me lyrically and also musically that I would like to also, that I wanted to manifest. That perhaps would not fit best into the niche that Rudra has created. So that's the reason why I decided to start another band with another friend to write lyrics and to also write music that is quite different from what Rudra is. All right. Okay. So that's the purpose of the Wandering Ascetic. So in Wandering Ascetic, I share the lyrical duties with the drummer. and I'm primarily the vocalist and the lyricist. So a lot of ideas that I bring into Wandering Ascetic. Now, lyrically is very different. It is philosophical, it is poetic, it has a lot of social topics in the lyrics and stuff like that. Like Eva Braun is a song that is named after Hitler's wife or girlfriend, right? And I Sing the Body Electric is a poem by an American poet, Walt Whitman, my favorite poet. And right, so all of this are basically rather the Wandering Ascetic is a platform for me to express ideas that may not fit into Rudra. Right? So that's exactly so that's the reason for the band. And it's not really people call it a project band, but it's not a project because project has always project starts and ends, right? So that's the definition of a project. So it's not a project band. This will go on, and we would release albums from time to time.
Okay, so we know that the lyrics differentiate the Wandering Ascetic and Rudra. Is it too constricting for me to say that the Wandering Ascetic is everything you can't do with Rudra? Or if not, how would you differentiate the vision between the two bands?
In that sense, the vision in the Wandering Ascetic is very loose. All right, so it can be everything and anything that we feel like doing. So there is no real constraint except that perhaps we wouldn't want to do anything that is not metal. The fact that all four of us are metal heads in the band. So yeah, so basically it doesn't constrict us. It doesn't restrain us from doing anything. But one thing that we do is sometimes there have been times that when we were writing the song in the studio where the drummer or the bassist would say, that sounds like Rudra. So that happens, right? So that has happened actually. So when that happens, then we know, because the principal songwriter in terms of the guitars and is Vinod. Now he writes most of the riffs, and then the drummer and the bassist contribute to the evolution of that what they listen. So one thing that I do is I try to isolate myself from the songwriting.
Okay.
So that's one way of regulating my influence over what comes out as a song on the album, and also how the song pans out. So by isolating myself from that songwriting process, it allows me to not have a bias, right? So it's a very positive and deliberate attempt on my side to stay away from that and not commenting on it, and let the whole process go through, so that I don't give in to my biases, which I'm sometimes aware, sometimes not.
Another super obvious question. The Wandering Ascetic is a product of experience, right? You're not going through the usual learnings a musician goes through while approaching, say, writing, recording, rehearsing, performing, because you've already done all of that with Rudra. So, what were the firsts or the learnings as such for you as a musician on the Wandering Ascetic?
Now, I like that question because I was talking about this experience with Vinod just the week before when we were in studio. So now what happened was, when I used to write lyrics, now I knew exactly how to phrase those syllables or the words fit the words into a song that has already been written. But this time, almost half the album, the lyrics for half the album was written by Kannan, the drummer. Now, when he writes the lyrics, he does not listen to the song and write the lyrics. He does not know where I've planned my vocal lines.
Okay.
So when he writes the lyrics and he gives it to me, and trying to fit those lines into a song that has been recorded has been a pain. Right. It has been very challenging and sometimes I would tell Kannan, now, would you give me the liberty to strike off some lines because I can't fit it? and of course, Kannan would definitely oblige. He said, yeah, go ahead, do what you need to do. So I would usually just check with him that, I'm going to reduce these lines. I'm going to maybe, can I delete these lines? Or can you replace these lines? So that was a new learning for me. It was a new experience because I wrote lyrics for songs. But this time it was the other way around. The song has been written, the lyric was not from me, and I had to fit that into a song that has been recorded. Now that has been quite challenging. So you know what? Back in the days, normally I do not practice my vocals before I go into the studio because I've already jammed these songs with the band, or I have vocalized it as I wrote the lyrics because I don't get a chance to rehearse the vocals. I go into the studio and I record it. That's how it goes. But this time around, I had to do homework. I got to sit down and listen to the songs and see where I'm going to fit the lines that Kannan had wrote. And yeah, it was interesting and also, tiring in a good way.
You've given us quite a bit of context, the band and also the album. Which track from Crimson do you think represents your sound? We'll cue it up after you set it up for us.
Now, the songs on Crimson are diverse. They are very diverse. I'm not sure if you had the chance to listen to the album, but they are very diverse. So much so that I think I've been reading some of those, a few of those reviews that have gone live, and that has been the observation of a couple of reviewers. It is very diverse. It is heavy metal, it is death metal, it is black metal. So it's very difficult for me to choose one song that would be representative of Crimson. Not for the fact that it would be injustice, is because I just can't, because every song sounds very different. From sometimes I would even ask myself whether this song would even be on the album at the time when I was laying the vocals. But after the album got mixed, and to be very honest, I think every song has a new rasa, a new experience that it creates. So it's very unique in that sense. So I'm very sorry to disappoint you for for not responding to your question in that sense.
So all right, what rasa would you like us to enjoy first?
I would say it has to be perhaps the will to live.
Okay, and why is that?
Just because that was the first song that I chose to be part of the live set. That was my choice. So therefore, yes, I would choose that one.
All right, so here's The Will to Live by the Wandering Ascetic.
Left, right, breathe in, breathe out. Kill with me, kill and repeat. Just survive, just survive. The will to do anything for survival. Morality does not exist, not yet, not now. Bringing secrets to your grave, you wish. Victors got the right to rewrite history. Left, right, left, right. Breathe in, breathe out. Kill, repeat, kill and repeat. Just survive, just survive. The future depends on you as usual. Never let me down again. See the stars, they're shining bright. Everything's alright tonight. And stand by fate, no escape. A glorious future awaits us all. And stand by fate, no escape. A glorious future awaits us all. Left, right. Breathe in, breathe out. Kill, repeat, kill and repeat. Just survive, just survive.
That was The Will to Live. It's a track of Crimson, the debut album from the Wandering Ascetic that releases February 2019. And we're still in conversation with vocalist Kathir. Now, Kathir, do you have any shows planned with the Wandering Ascetic?
Yes, we have 3 shows planned for the year. We are playing a show in March. There's a show, I'm not sure, towards the end of March in Malaysia. Now we have that. And then we have another show in June, again in Malaysia. And another one towards the end of the year in Singapore. Now we've got 3 shows lined up.
Great. Now I know you've played some excellent shows in the past with Rudra in India. Do you have any plans to come to India soon? When can we expect to see you?
Yeah, and there's also a link there with Transcending Obscurity. So there is a connection, right?
Now we have not played in India in a long time, actually. And we kind of planned a Indian tour actually in the beginning of last year. We did not work out. So, and we also got an invitation to play last year, but the dates did not fit our calendar. But to be very honest, now India is always a great place for us to play because we have probably a big fan base in India compared to other continents, and also for the fact that we also share the philosophical heritage of India with the band itself. So anytime, buddies, anytime if we receive an invitation, we'll be the first to be there. Now this is a place that we never say no to. Yeah.
And yeah, we'd be thrilled to have you back. Now, we've bothered you for around 45 minutes or so, and that's a lot more than what we could have asked for. So let's wrap up. What are you reading these days, and what are you listening to? Any material that sparked new ideas?
Right. At this point, I've not done anything new, perhaps, but one of the things that I'm reading at present is this book that I have here. Yeah, it is Brahma Sutram Chatusutri. That means Brahma Sutram is a text, perhaps 300 CE, about 1,700 years old text, authored by a person called Badarayana, this author. And I'm studying the first 4 aphorisms have been, it's a commentary on the first 4 aphorisms of Brahma Sutra, and it's quite thick. Yeah. So this is what I'm reading right now, looking through, examining what it means. So this is my current read. As far as listening to music, I am listening to a lot of new material. I'm a fan of new material. I do not, I cherish the past, but I try not to get stuck by the past. So last year, I think I published my on Facebook and Instagram my top 10 albums. Right now, what have I been into? Now, let me be very honest with you by telling you what's on my playlist on Spotify. All right?
Okay.
So that'll be very honest, and instantaneously you know what I'm listening to right now. So right now I am on what's on my downloaded albums. Let me see. Okay, so here it is. Agni, that is an Indian band.
Okay.
Right, and a local Singaporean band called Sangrianto. The album Blood Pact. System of a Down is also on the playlist. Skid Row's first album is on the playlist. Tesla is on my playlist as well. And this may be a little surprising for you. Lady Gaga, is also on my playlist. This is what's on my playlist. None of them is actually extreme metal.
That's excellent. On that note, Kathir, thank you so much for your time. And that's a wrap on this interview.
You're most welcome. Yeah.
That went rather well, huh, Pete?
Oh yeah, I think that went quite well.
What else have you been up to, man? How was that Tesseract gig?
Well, the Tesseract gig, to be honest, I was quite skeptical in the start about the whole venue since they didn't announce one in the start. But yeah, and once I entered the venue, I kind of felt that this would kind of fit in with the kind of music they had. And the band was spot on. I mean, the band are at their prime at the moment, if I may say so. The set list, if I look at it, included a mix of their tracks all the way from their latest album Sonder to even old favorites from Concealing Fate. There was something for everyone. But man, one thing I missed out was I kept looking out for you during the show.
Yeah. I had my ticket and I'm still kicking myself for not showing up. Just whatever, work scenes. As a consolation, I did attend Ustad Zakir Hussain and Rakesh Chaurasia concert. And of course, that's fantastic. Zakir is Zakir, but I would have loved to get that gent on too.
Yeah. But man, on another note, there was a bit of a bummer last week. Sad to know that, Bruce Corbett, the vocalist for the legendary Rigor Mortis and also War Beast, is no longer with us. He passed away on the 25th of Jan.
Yeah, man. News like that is always hard to hear, but well, he'll forever live on. All we have to do is push play.
True.
So, that's all she wrote on this episode 4 of Horns Up. I'm at Asmoani on Twitter.
And I'm Trend Crusher.
And we are at Horns Up Pod. Share, subscribe, chill, shit on us, whatever floats your boat. But remember to throw them horns up.
Horns up.